plot that we are investigating, we believe, was an attempt to put a device onto an aircraft. But beyond that, the speculation is just that, it's speculation. And until we finish our investigation, until we know which of our many working theories we have, and until we can put that information before the courts, it's not helpful to keep speculating.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And that warning from the AFP's Andrew Colvin on the terror raids in Sydney came last Monday. But in the absence of hard information, until two men were charged on Thursday night, speculation or leaks were all the media had to go on, and they did not hold back. The morning after the raids, the Sunday Telly's front page told us...
Domestic flight, proposed target.
But by next day, the Australian's page one story was equally confident the aim was to bring down...
a long-haul passenger flight destined for the Middle East.
While by that evening, the ABC was suggesting...
the conspirators may have already tried to smuggle the homemade bomb onto an international flight, but had failed. The next plan was to get it onto a domestic flight.
On Friday, the AFP confirmed a Middle East flight was the target and claimed the plotters had attempted to smuggle a bomb on board an Etihad plane in mid-July. So the media got plenty right. But this claim on the Daily Mail's Facebook page was always going to be wrong.
Terror raids find plan to blow up flight from Jakarta to Australia.
To build a bomb in Sydney, then fly it to Indonesia, would surely be absurd. So, how did it ever get traction? Well, it all grew out of this online story in Monday's Telegraph.
Police have found a flight number for a Jakarta to Sydney route inside a bin at a Lakemba home linked to the alleged plot.
Could have been damning. Except it was clear from the picture that the Jakarta flight had already flown, and this was a release slip limiting the airline's liability for trashing your bags. Yet that didn't stop the telly trumpeting the story, or 7 News that night claiming...
7 News has exclusive new details tonight on the Sydney terror plot targeting a passenger jet. Police have seized airline documentation from a raided house, plus a meat grinder.
9 News Online and the UK Telegraph also jumped to the wrong conclusion.
Police in Australia believe an alleged plot to blow up a plane may have involved a flight from Jakarta to Sydney.
And was there any truth in it? Answer, no.
Flight note not what it seems.
As news.com.au reported next day, it was all a false alarm. The flight slip had been chucked in the rubbish by a neighbour. Whoops, collapse of theory. But what about the bomb? Well, it was clear from first reports that the tip-off to police had come with very little detail.
There was a threat of a device and an aircraft.
A law enforcement official.
And it was also clear that police did not know what they were looking for. But on day 2, the Daily Telly exclusively revealed it was...
a crude homemade bomb disguised as a kitchen mincer hidden in carry-on luggage.
Adding that...
police seized a multi-mincer used to make sausages.
The Telly's exclusive was pretty much bang in line with what police now allege. Obviously, their sources are good. Yet, it was surely still worth asking why anyone would take a mincer onto a flight and how they would get it past airport security. SBS asked a former AFP intelligence coordinator that question and got what seemed to be the obvious answer.
When it went through a scanner, there'd be a lot of metal to be detected, and you would think, as a general rule, it'd get a closer inspection and be detected.
Indeed you would. But, according to police, the plotters never got the mincer past the checkout desk, so it never got to be screened. Meanwhile, citing multiple sources, the Australian was telling us just as confidently that the bomb was...
a non-traditional explosive device that could have emitted a toxic, sulphur-based gas that would have killed or immobilised everyone on the aircraft.
That seemed even more unlikely. Gas everyone on the plane, 500 people or more. That would be a pretty big mincer. And once again, the ex-AFP expert was not convinced.
It would be incredibly difficult to get the quantity of gas needed of a poisonous substance onto a plane without being detected by authorities.
And so it would. But how might it work? The telly told us the gas would be sulphur-based and that the alleged terrorists planned...
to use wood scrapings and explosive material.
Wood scrapings? Really? Terror expert Greg Barton doubted the gas story altogether, telling Sky News...
It makes zero sense to me, actually, especially reference to sulphur compounds. There's nothing so powerful that would, command a whole aircraft cabin. Even if you had sarin on board an aircraft, you wouldn't be able to do it.
Nevertheless, by midweek, the gas bomb theory was widely accepted, even if the Mail's version was that the four men, we'll make that two,
planned to gas all passengers on board before detonating the bomb.
Well, no. The AFP told the media on Friday there was a plan to build a chemical device after the failed attempt to get the Mincer bomb on board. But the plane was not the target, and it was a mile from ever working.
This hydrogen sulfide is very difficult to make, so I want to make it quite clear that whilst it may have been a hypothetical plot for these people to put forward, we were a long way from having a functional device.
Once again, the media got some of that right and some of it wrong. But when police themselves are trying to figure it out, even direct leaks from the investigation are not 100% reliable. Meanwhile, in the early days, the Sydney Morning Herald was trumpeting a scoop of its own.
Men arrested over Sydney plane bomb plot have links to aviation industry.
That seemed pretty damning too. But if you read the article, you discovered the so-called aviation links involved the son of one of the arrested men who had studied aviation management. And as the Herald told us, he
has not been arrested and is not facing charges.
The Herald also told readers
Fairfax Media is not suggesting he is involved in the allegations, and police don't believe the group infiltrated any internal airport systems or staff.
In which case, why was that a headline story? The Herald got much closer to a proper scoop on Thursday with this revelation.
Sydney terrorist plot. Bid to smuggle bomb through airport thwarted at check-in.
The passenger was queried about the weight of the luggage at the check-in counter and learnt it was too heavy. The bag was never checked in or carried on the plane.
But it has to be said the ABC first made that claim 3 days earlier, though with none of that detail. Terror investigations like this are certainly hard for reporters. Little information leaks out, and it's almost impossible to know what bits can be trusted. But we reckon the media did a pretty good job, despite Friday's barbed comment from AFP Deputy Commissioner Michael Phelan.
The reason we're having this conference today is obviously due to the massive amount of interest that's happened over the last week, and quite frankly to correct a lot of the, I was going to say fictional, but perhaps I won't say that, reporting over the last week.
Ouch. It remains to be seen, of course, whether the allegations against the two accused will stand up in court. But now to the split in the Liberal Party over same-sex marriage, which has been playing out in Canberra today, and on which Tony Abbott's views were setting the agenda this morning on TV and radio.
We've put the plebiscite up once, that's all. We should have another go. And if that fails, let's have another go.
Tony Abbott's views were also making the running online, as indeed they were for most of last week.
Why Tony Abbott won't back gay marriage bill. Marriage protects women and children.
But, as usual, it was Macquarie Radio that had given Mr Abbott his platform, because when the former PM gives interviews, it is typically to 2GB and its affiliate stations, starting with his weekly chat with Ben Fordham.
Every Wednesday afternoon we catch up with the member for Warringah, Tony Abbott,
where the hot topic last week was marriage.
It was something that evolved many centuries ago to protect women and children. That's why I would be very reluctant to change.
And when Tony Abbott speaks, the media repeats, with TV news and headline coverage that night and breakfast next day. And we saw a similar pattern, but with a different story, last month.
Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott has cast doubt over the need for a Home Affairs ministry.
Once again, his chat with Ben Fordham was where this story had all begun.
The advice back then was that we didn't need the kind of massive bureaucratic change which it seems the Prime Minister has in mind.
And once again, Mr Abbott's comments made news on TV and several websites, including the ABC, the West Australian and the Sydney Morning Herald. While the Financial Review also reacted, if only to point out that the former PM had
resumed his campaign to destabilise Malcolm Turnbull's leadership.
With that sort of impact, it's no wonder Ben Fordham is happy to offer an open mic to the Conservatives' chief bomb thrower. But the spoils are shared around the network, with Macquarie Radio's Ray Hadley also freeing up a fortnightly spot.
Well, it's rather significant that this morning I have the former Prime Minister Tony Abbott in the studio in light of the fixer, Christopher Pyne's performance over the past few days.
And when Mr Abbott arrived in the studio on that occasion, the TV cameras were waiting.
My point, Ray, is that you've got to be fair income with the Australian people, and it looks like that's not been true of Christopher.
And once again, his remarks ricocheted around the country.
Tony Abbott has accused Christopher Pyne of disloyalty after the frontbencher was caught boasting that same-sex marriage will become a reality.
The former PM also likes to chat to another 2GB stalwart, his good friend Alan Jones. And Jones makes no secret of how much he admires the member for Warringah.
Out there in the marketplace, Abbott's a rock star. Goes to supermarkets, goes to football matches, goes on the poly pedal. They can't get enough of him. Abbott is the only person capable of dragging these people back into the Liberal Party.
Since March this year, on our count, Mr Abbott has been interviewed on 2GB 32 times, of which 5 were breakfasts with Alan, 7 were with Ray, and 20 were with Ben Ninja of Fordham. And those interviews were so good that 13 were repeated, which brought Abbott's total to more than 8 hours of airtime in just 20 weeks. That is quite remarkable. But Tony believes he deserves all the attention.
As a former Prime Minister, I've got not just a right but a duty to speak out where I think it's important.
We doubt Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull agrees, and nor do many voters. A recent news poll asked people whether
Tony Abbott should remain on the backbench and make an undertaking to stop commenting on the government's performance.
48% of voters said yes. But that was quickly dismissed by 2GB's Ray Hadley, who told listeners
almost half of them want him to stop commenting on the government's performance. Well, that won't be happening. That won't be happening.
We're sure it won't, especially since Mr Abbott's former advisor Peter Credlin has been telling her Sky News viewers that Mr Turnbull will be out by Christmas. And finally tonight, still in politics, to the end of an era.
For half a century, the Nine Network's political editor, Laurie Oakes, has led the way, uncovering the intrigues of Parliament, breaking some of the biggest political stories of our time. But he's finally calling it a day.
The King of the Canberra Press Gallery announced his retirement on Thursday after more than 50 years in journalism, in which time he's seen 13 Prime Ministers, 20 elections and 51 budgets. In an era when television was the primary news source and Nine ruled the airwaves, Laurie grew to dominate political reporting and often made news himself.
Well, we don't have to wait until Tuesday night to find out what's in Mr John Howard's budget. It's been leaked.
To him, of course. More recently, Oakes tackled Julia Gillard with inside info on her rise to power.
To the famous meeting in Kevin Rudd's office the night before you became Prime Minister.
And whoever they were, interviewees were prey.
Does that mean an open cheque? Why is that disgusting? Doesn't this just convince people that you're all the same? Aren't you concerned that the government looks sloppy?
Yes. Some of his questions weren't fair, or not in our opinion, and we said so at the time. Like this one to Joe Hockey after the 2014 federal budget.
You were dancing in your office before you got up to give that speech. Why were you dancing?
Dancing? But there's no doubt he's been a towering figure of political journalism in this country for decades, with a rare talent for incisive, non-partisan analysis. And a host of others have been paying tribute, from his Canberra colleagues, like Michelle Grattan and Samantha Maiden, to politicians on both sides, like Bill Shorten and Barnaby Joyce. So, why retire? Well, at 73, it's been a long innings, and he's fed up with how the game of politics is now being played.
Well, look, Pete, we're in a mess, and I hope our politicians come to their senses. People are sick of politicians and political parties talking about themselves, navel-gazing.
No chance of Laurie ever doing that. We'll miss him. And you can read more about tonight's stories on our Facebook page or our website. You can also catch up with us on iView and contact me or MediaWatch on Twitter. And make sure you catch Media Bites every Thursday. But for now, until next week, that's all from us. Goodbye.